For over 35 years, Todd Garner has overseen blockbuster films like Con Air, Anger Management, Triple X, 13 Going on 30, and the Mortal Kombat franchise.
Why are they letting you make these movies?
Join Todd as he shares tips and stories from the front lines of producing in Hollywood.
I'm Adam Sandler.
I'm Rebel Wilson.
This is Jeff Probst.
I'm Kaylee Cuoco.
I'm Eli Roth.
This is Marlon Wayans.
Hey, it's Ed Helms.
This is Shay Mitchell.
Hey everybody, this is Kevin James, and this is The Producer's Guide.
The Producer's Guide.
The Producer's Guide.
The Producer's Guide with Todd Garner.
Todd Garner.
Todd Garner.
Todd Garner.
What a combination.
Welcome to the Producer's Guide podcast. I'm Todd Garner, the show that goes behind the scenes with the filmmakers shaping today's biggest stories. Today's guest is writer-director Adam Sztykiel. Adam's most recently directed his original screenplay, Let's Have Kids for MRC with Karen Gillian and Zoe Chow, and is also attached to direct Super High for New Line. Adam is currently writing Horrible Bosses 3 for New Line and Quartermain for Amazon. His other previous feature credits include Black Adam for DC, Rampage for New Line, which also starred Dwayne Johnson, and Due Date for Warner Brothers starring Robert Downey Jr. and Zach Galifianakis. In television, Adam is currently running Bad Monkey Season 2 for Apple with Vince Vaughn starring. He's also created and executive produced the NBC sitcom Undateable, which ran for 3 seasons. The reason I want to have Adam on today is that he's not only an incredible writer, and he is an incredible script doctor, which means that the biggest studios for the biggest movies bring him in to help shape their movies right before they're going to make them to make sure that they are the best that they possibly can be. But he also has become a director, and his movie is fantastic. We had a deep dive today about the business, about writing, and about where the business of comedy is headed. Enjoy. All right, I'm here with the multi-talented, multi-hyphenated, hopefully caffeinated Adam Sztykiel. Hello, Adam. How are you, brother?
Buddy?
I wanted to have you on because you're like first of all, you're like a triple threat. You do television features, you write, you direct, you produce. So you have a great knowledge of the business, especially the comedy business and the big IP action space. But also, you are probably one of the biggest script doctors out there, and you're saving everybody's ass, including my ass a few times.
Thanks, pal. I do what I can.
On movies, writing these big movies and helping these movies when we are about to the start line or if they're in trouble. But before we get into that, you were born and grew up in Michigan, and then you went to USC. When you went to USC, did you have a pretty clear idea in your mind, or even growing up in Michigan, that this is the career that you wanted to pursue? Or how did that idea enter your consciousness?
Yeah, I mean, growing up, I was a movie obsessive, like most of us are. And I remember like even early in high school, sort of, found out that there were these film schools, of which, USC is the finest. And so when I was a junior, senior in high school, I mean, I applied to Michigan because it was nearby, and I applied to USC Film School because that's all I wanted to do with my life. And I got lucky enough; I was accepted into the production program. And then the story I will share is that I had a class. I think it was my sophomore year where they would bring in like industry professionals once a week. Garner, you've probably done these before. Mm-hmm. And it's like they'll bring an agent in this week, and they'll bring, a producer in one week. And I remember the very first week, they go, who here wants to be a director? Everybody's hand goes up, and they go, it's not going to happen for any of you. And we're all devastated, just like a room full of film school kids. He was like, here's the real. When you graduate film school, no one's going to give you $5, $10, $15, $20 million to go direct a movie. If you want to be a filmmaker, be a writer. Go write a script that you can walk in and you can say, if you love this, you will let me direct it. And I followed that advice. And, 20 some years after I graduated from middle school, I was able to like walk in with that script and go, I want to direct this. And that's how it worked for me.
Do you remember the moment or the movie that inspired you to say, I want to do this?
God, dude, that's a really great question that weirdly I've never been asked before. I mean, I remember the first movie I saw in a movie theater. And I think this does sort of speak to it because We went to see, my dad took me and my younger sister, who was 2 years younger. I was 6, she was 4. We went to see The Muppets Take Manhattan. And here's what I remember. We go into the theater. For whatever reason, there's no one else in the theater. It's just us. And that was like a really weird feeling to be in a movie theater alone. So weird that I said to my dad, I was like, this is creeping me out. Where are the other people in the audience? And so we got up, we went one theater over, and for whatever reason, Supergirl, which was also playing at the same time, was a packed theater. And in that theater, in that packed theater, it was like, okay, this is what movies should be. And I think like that was really when I was like, oh, I'm like, this is awesome. I love this. I love being in a room full of people and like having this shared experience with a bunch of strangers. So that was like a formative experience. And then, dude, to be honest, I can't remember a time that I didn't want to make movies or tell stories. I will say I got really lucky in that I kind of grew up as a kid in the 80s. So you had like Spielberg, Zemeckis, Ghostbusters, like all these incredible, just like big audience, 4-quad awesome movies. And then when I became a teenager, that's when we got into like Tarantino, Spielberg, PTA, like all those, or Soderbergh, sorry, PTA, all those people. And it's like, I just got lucky that like right when I wanted to be cool, that's when like alt filmmaking and all those awesome filmmakers came up. So like, you know, I just got really lucky in that I have both of those sort of in my DNA, but as far back as I can remember, man.
What did you say on your application that got you accepted to USC Film School?
That's a great looking back, I think it was my grades and my test scores, which just happened to be very high. And I think at the time USC was like really making a push to become more of an academic institution. So they were like, sure, you can you can come to film school if we can put these in our pool of test scores. But I don't remember, man. I mean, I talked a lot about, you know, I was a theater kid and I talked a lot about that. I remember they asked like, what's a story you would adapt into a film or a short film? And it was like I think it was like a Ray Bradbury story I had just read. It was like the day after a nuclear attack and like, you know, all the sprinklers going off and all the things happening without humans. And that is as far as you can get from the types of movies I actually make.
I was going to say, you could have said Black Adam and you would have come full circle.
There you go. Yeah, who knew? I was projecting forward many decades, but it was that. And then there was, you know, they had asked if you had any experience, and like, you know, I had dicked around with my friends and made a couple movies, but definitely nothing spectacular. But I think enough that, and I will say this, at that time, and I don't know if it's changed because we're 800 years later since I went to film school. When I look at the people I was in film school with, it felt a lot like what they were really looking for is people who had a passion for storytelling, but were still very much moldable clay. That like didn't know a lot about the technical side of filmmaking and like had not yet been exposed to, you know, sort of tons of, you know, foreign films and that kind of stuff, because it really was a like built from the ground up experience for everybody there. And nobody there was like, well, I already know what a foot candle is and I don't need to take a cinematography class and that kind of stuff.
What did it look like being a theater kid in Michigan, and walk me through the idea of making a film and how that actually physically came to pass?
As a kid?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, as a theater kid, look, I got really lucky. My high school just happened to have Mrs. Labatt, shout out. She was this incredible drama instructor who had been there forever. And she just, and you don't know it, like you it's not like in high school, I know what other high schools are doing. So only now do I realize like what a high level we were functioning at. And there was like a pretty cool history. Like the Raimis went to my high school, Bruce Campbell. Like, so there's like a lot of, you know, there was sort of a history there already. It was just cool. Like I just happened to have a lot of friends that were also into acting and performing and putting on shows and sort of, so we all did that together. And then I will say like, there was an opportunity when you were a junior and a senior to actually direct one-act plays that you would cast freshmen and sophomores. And so that was this other really great experience where you're like, oh, now I get to do the other side of the job and also realize like, holy shit, there is so much more going on than simply showing up, doing my blocking and knowing my lines. Like you're essentially directing and producing your own show. And it just gave you so much more respect for the process. And then as far as movies go, I mean, honestly, we had at the time, it was tape. It was like 8mm camcorder. The first ones were like, my dad was a lawyer and they actually had the old like shoulder mounted VHS cameras that they would use for depositions. And
JVC, was it the brand
it
JVC?
was a JVC. Absolutely.
Yeah, man.
Dude.
They had the strap so you could
The whole
carry
thing, and like
the
the mic that stuck way out from
right.
the end.
But now let me ask you a question. Did the VHS tape go in the camera, or did you have a separate thing you had to have the strap for?
No, it went into the camera. You popped it in.
Fancy. Wow, that's lawyer money, man. That's
that's
fancy.
right. So he would let me bring it home on the weekends, so I would drag my sisters into it and like be like, "Hey, you're gonna stand here and you're gonna hold this fake gun, and I'm gonna come in and kick you or whatever it is, like." And then we had, there was again a group of friends of mine that were all into it, and so like as we got older, we would go out and we would like shoot little stuff. And then anytime there was a school project, some sort of like report or whatever it was, I would always say, can I do a video instead? And, they're like, yeah, of course. So it's like, I remember we had to do a report on Chernobyl. And so like my buddies and I like did Craig Mazin, long before he did it, we were doing our Chernobyl movie. And I just it was like every opportunity I could get to shoot something, I would do it.
So let's jump ahead. This poor professional comes in and says, you're never going to be a director. You got to be a writer. You go home, you sit down in front of your computer. What does that feel like? What do you take inventory of your strengths and what you like? Tell me how that kind of first script comes about, and what was the genre of that first script?
Okay, so by the way, it was Michael Wright who came in and told us that none of us were going to be directors. And
Wright or White?
Wright. He was a
Okay,
CA
yes.
at the time.
Oh,
and
yeah,
then, went on
sure.
to, run DreamWorks and MGM and all these places. But he came in and was like, nah. So I walked away and I really did take it to heart. I was like, okay, like that makes a lot of sense to me. That resonates. And so the first script that I wrote was about, I mean, it's so funny. You kind of like write what you know. Even if you don't know, you're right. Even if you don't know you're doing it, that's what you're doing. So at the time, I'm like living in LA with like 4 other dudes that I knew from like high school and from LA. And, we're all sort of like in some way, shape, or form trying to carve a path into the entertainment industry. And I essentially take that vibe and then I converted that into a comedy about 5 friends who really like didn't have anything going on and were like, what seems like a thing we could do? I feel like we could form our own boy band. And so it was like basically 5 dipshits, which is a premise for so many things I've written. It starts with 5 dipshits. But started their own boy band. And I just kind of like wrote it like on a whim and didn't really outline it. And what I did is I said, I'm going to write 5 pages a day. And it was over a summer, so I wasn't in school. So I just sat down and I did that. I got up every morning and I wrote 5 pages, like good, bad, whatever. And I got through a draft and, I was like, okay, like that has a beginning, middle, and end. And then kind of kept rewriting it and revising it. And honestly, like that became my first screenplay, my first sample, and sort of like, and I also came away from that being like, I understand this. Like, I just like in my bones, like I know there's a million warts on this thing, but I just understand how a movie screenplay is meant to be put together. But it was a comedy and it was very like dialogue driven. It's like all the stuff that I would then go on to do over and over and over again. But I just had a sense, I'm like, yeah, I get this. I can do this.
How did you know how to do it?
The easy answer is just like God gave me the gift. But the truth is, and I've realized this now that I'm a parent, because my daughter does this to me. When I was a kid, whatever I would watch, I would then tell my mother the entire thing back to her. So like from the time I was very young all the way up to like, I remember seeing Like the amount of movies I've spoiled for my mom is just, and like I came home from Usual Suspects and was like, let me tell you what I just saw, and I would literally like tell the whole story.
First of all, Kevin Spacey did it. Now let me tell you about the
Let me start at the end. So I did it. I remember doing it for Shawshank, and my mom is like, just like this incredibly like positive, supportive person. So she would always say to me like, I feel like I've seen the movie, which could have been a compliment or could have been super annoyed. But for her, it was like a huge comment. I feel like I've seen the movie when you tell it to me. And now my daughter does it to me. So I make a point of being like, all right, like, go ahead, let me hear it. But I think if I look back, I do think that in large part is the reason I just had this like catalog of structure in my head for every genre of movie. Cause my mom would sit there and let me literally recount to her the entire story. And then the more you do it, and it's like pitching, dude, I start to realize like, oh, I can see this part is resonating with her. And I can see like this part, as I explain, it's a little confusing. And being able to do that with movies that already existed, I think honed my ability to just then go do it on my own.
But after Michael Wright says, be a screenwriter, practically, how do you do it? How do you know where the dialogue goes? How do you know the structure? What was the software? Did you take a class at USC? Like practically, when you sat down, how did you do it? And by the way, did you start with just pitching yourself the movie on the computer? Did you just pitch the movie and like sort of outline it that way, or how did that?
I didn't. I mean, listen, man, I made so many mistakes on my first one.
That's good though. That's the way you learn.
My first mistake was I did not think about it past a log line. And so, and thank God I gave that myself the task of 5 pages a day, because what ends up happening is you're just like, I'm writing into nowhere because I don't know where it's going. It's like I knew how it started and I knew how it ended, and then I kind of figure out the rest. As far as like practically speaking, I remember like I got final draft from a buddy who had like bought, this is back when it was like hard disks you had to like load onto your computer. I had a laptop obviously for school. He gave me his discs and whatever the code was to, unlock it. And him and I had sort of like written some stuff together. I owe him a debt of gratitude in that like he really, my buddy, Matt kind of trained me how to do it. He had gone to NYU to study screenwriting. So it's like, he got all the like, this is, it's like, these are action lines and this is a slug line, and this is dialogue. And we had tried to write something together over the summer previous. And I give him all the credit. It's like, I don't even want to take any credit because I was literally like the guy pacing around the room, just like being like, what about this? What if that happened? What if they stole the car? And he's sitting there being like, yeah, hold on. Let me exterior, the road, day, like the two guy, blah, blah, blah. He's doing all the work. He's making all the choices. But I remember like being there watching him do it. That's really where I figured out like, okay. And then he would give me these little like tidbits that no one, at least for me, taught me in film school, but you kind of learn as you go, where he was like I would try to write action and he'd be like, bro, that's 14 lines of action. People checked out 10 lines ago. Like keep it 4 lines or less. And then we got to be doing something. So I was like, okay, like efficiency is important, like it's not a novel, that's not what this format is. So he really kind of taught me the ins and outs of that kind of stuff. And then the rest I figured out of my own, honestly, from like sharing it with people and getting feedback. And like, I'll give you the first thing I learned when I shared it with people like in the business that knew, is they were like, all these characters sound the same.
Mm-hmm.
And I would be willing to bet that's a mistake that so many, especially comedy writers, make out of the gate, because what you're doing is, again, everyone is sort of a composite of you and your friend group. And yes, your friend group tends to all talk the same. It's sort of like what ends up happening. And at first you're kind of like, well, yeah, because they're all friends. And then what you quickly realize is like, oh, but this is a movie. And we want different perspectives and we want different characters and we want, different points of view. And so that was like a really great lesson to get out of the gate, which is like, if they all talk the same, make them one character. This doesn't make any sense.
And you talk about, because you did help me on Tag. We brought you in to do some work on Tag, which is just essentially 5 idiots all talking to each other.
Yes, dude.
So you do have this. You admittedly say that you have this theme running through. What were your influences then for that? Is it Diner, Breaking Away, Stand by Me, like, or all of those movies? Like, what are the movies you can remember influencing your writing and your comedy style?
Yeah, I mean, listen, you've already said several of them. I mean, Diner's a big one. Pretty much like 80s, even go back 70s, 80s, 90s, character driven, oftentimes ensemble comedies, are sort of what I connected with the most, like emotionally, I would say. I mean, look, I loved Back to the Future and Jurassic Park as much as anybody, but the reality is the movies I connected to emotionally were John Hughes, Cameron Crowe, Rob Reiner, Barry Levinson, like these, like real people dealing with real shit, but in a very funny way. And I think, I mean, dude, Tag to me,
All writer directors, by the way.
right. It's like, I think there's then the movie that I wrote with my wife and directed, like at the end of the day, I'm like, this is a character driven comedy, like about a real sort of real life stuff, but that is done in a funny way with hopefully a big hearted ending. And like, that's Tag to me is sort of the template, of what I love, which is it's a group of friends. They're going through some shit. It is ultimately a very emotionally resonant story, but there's so many laughs on the way there that ending lands so much better because, and I think we did our job pretty well on that one. Like you soften everybody up with the laughs and then you bring in the real kind of emotional stakes at the end. And
Yeah.
my name is not on that movie because again, that was a script doctor job. But when I share with people that I worked on it, I get so many like, oh my God, I love that movie. And the reason they love it is because yes, it's funny, but the first thing they talk about is how they felt at the end of the movie. And I think like that to me is always what I'm going for is, how do we make you laugh so that we can really kind of like pull your heart out and show it to you at the end.
Yeah, Jeff Tomsic, the director, and I talked about it all the time. Those movies, all those movies that we just mentioned, and by the way, most of those filmmakers that you just mentioned, they're all writing about the same thing, which is what guys do because they don't know how to hug.
Yeah. True.
So we always would say that like these guys play tag because they just don't know how to hug. So what is your favorite part of writing?
My favorite part of writing, oh God, that's such a good question. I'm gonna cheat and give you a multiple part answer.
Sure.
One part is the phase when you have not started writing yet, when it's still, whether it's an idea that comes from somebody like you or it's something that I generate, but you're kind of like letting it roll around in your head. And it's still kind of like coming into formation of what it is. And you're sort of like, oh my God, wouldn't it be incredible if? And I'd love to see a scene where this happens. And oh my God, how just like emotionally satisfying would it be if this is where you can land at the end of that movie? Like when all those pieces are coming into place and you're not yet bogged down in the mechanics of how do we get from this place to that place and all that kind of stuff. And then on the other end of the spectrum, my other favorite part is when it is in maximal collaboration mode, when everybody is in there pitching ideas, figuring out what is the best version of the movie. Because to me, that's where like, A, you're getting all the different perspectives, and B, like there's just, I mean, especially with screenwriting, even though it is a very oftentimes lonely and it's, oftentimes one guy or girl in front of a laptop, the reality is it is so collaborative. Like usually when you're alone in front of your laptop in the best version, it's because you have just left a room full of people talking about what the best version of the movie is. And look, man, my opinion, and I have a feeling that you share this as well, because we've done enough stuff together at this point where I see it all the time from you, is the best movies usually emerge when you have a group of people that all see the same movie. And that only happens That does not happen. No one walks into a room and goes, "You see this movie? Me too. Great, let's go make it." It comes from sitting around, talking about it, talking about the movies we love that inform this movie, talking about, the moments in our favorite movies, the moments we're excited about in this movie. And that's really what gets me going the most, is when you walk out and go, "God, dude, we're all making the same movie." And I'm so fired up to go write that now.
Yeah, and you said it before about a friend group too, that you end up sounding alike and you end up liking the same things. And when you have a more diverse group, it's more interesting. It's the same thing with the filmmaking process. When you bring a bunch of people together that have disparate histories and points of view and genders and cultures, but they all are making the same movie, then you can inject all these really interesting multidimensional points of view, which hopefully make the movie that much better. What's the most painful part of writing?
I mean, dude, I will listen, and I bet you so many writers say the same thing. It's opening the notes document. And it's not, listen, dude, it's not because you don't want to do the notes. It's not because you don't agree with the notes. It's because, from my experience, you have constructed this thing that in your mind is such a tightly woven tapestry that you're like, fuck, if I start pulling threads, this whole thing tumbles down. And really what it comes down to, it's that fear of the blank page. You're like, I really like what I did, and I'm afraid if I start to pull it apart, I won't be able to reach the height I already did. And here's the craziest part. Every single time, it's always better afterward. And yet every single time you go through that same experience of like, okay, here we go. This is where I peaked, and now I'm going to try to execute these notes, and it's going to be worse. And we should have just taken what we bird in hand. And it never turns out that way. It's always better after you do the rewrite, but you've just like convinced yourself like, I've tied it all in this particular way, and now I'm going to start pulling threads. And it's just, it's the terror of that. And then once you, and like, by the way, I've had to train myself, man, to like, I open the notes document now and I don't even let myself think. I just start the rewrite, because once you start it, you're like, oh yeah, this feels good. Like this is actually getting better. But the mistake I used to make is I'd open the document, I'd read the notes, and then I would get up and like walk around and start ruminating. And then you're 3 days out just being like, I haven't done anything. I'm afraid to touch it. Like, how's this going to go? And it's all in your head.
So now that you've directed a movie, I would assume that same feeling is the first preview after you finish, when you're putting it in front of an audience, because you're like, okay, here we go. Gonna hear all the input and see if I can fix it.
Yeah. I mean, look, that's also terrifying as a writer too, because it is, and again, I feel like I am probably in the majority here. We wouldn't do what we do if we didn't have some degree of control freak in us. And that moment when you got to put this thing up and be like, I hope we got the correct 200 people in here, because who the hell knows how this is going to go. But even then, man, like, you and I have been both through those where in fact, I will speak to the movie I directed, Let's Have Kids. We had a screening of that movie, and it was everything you're describing. It is the abject terror of like, I feel really good about this. And the secret, if I really do some self-analysis, is you're convincing yourself the movie's great, and I'm afraid they're going to say it's not, and then I'm going to be forced to unravel. The real fear is it's not great. Obviously, that's the real.
Well, I always, sorry to interrupt you. The first-time directors, when they're going in, I've done it, I mean, probably more than 1,000 test screenings. So first-time directors will generally, on the first test screening, say to me, like, what's it like? And I said, well, imagine standing naked in front of 400 people, and you give each one of them a laser pointer, and then you ask the question, point out my flaws.
That's exactly what it is.
That is what it's like.
Yeah, I felt like a 1980s sorority girl, just like,
rushing the sorority, hoping to be picked.
Yeah.
So sorry. So keep going.
No, I mean, listen, I'm glad you interrupted, because I'm going to admit this because hopefully I can help one soul out there. As I know you can attest, I'm an incredibly collaborative, very like good-natured, pretty unflappable, like let's just keep pushing forward. The days before our test screening, I was a lunatic. Like it was just like the amount of, because also like I'm not used to that feeling. Like I'm not used to the feeling of like, to your point, hey man, go stand with a laser pointer and or they're going to point out all your flaws. And it was such a lack of control and such a, because again, the problem is you're like, if the real fear isn't just the movie's not good, the real fear is like I don't have it. Like they're gonna say XYZ and I didn't do it. And I was pretty confident we had done a good job, but it's still, you're like, what if? What if I'm wrong? What if because then you go to real dark places. You're like, maybe I don't belong in this business at all. And again, this is before anyone's watched a frame of the movie. So then I sit there and I watch it. And again, to your point, I've sat through many of these as a writer, completely different experience as the director. And you sit through it, and it's actually amazing to sit through with an audience, like for good and bad. You're like, this is why I got into this business in the first place. This is me as a 6-year-old watching Supergirl with an audience. I'm listening to them laugh in all the right places. I'm watching them cry in all the right places. And then on the other side, you sit there and go, they're bored for like 10 minutes in the middle of this movie. And it was such a great, like, and then you walk out and you talk to everybody and you go, hey man, I feel like everybody was bored from here to here. And everyone goes, yeah, I agree. And I go, cool, let us go back in, let us trim some fat. And yeah, you go back and we took like 7 or 8 minutes out of the movie and it was great. It like, then you show and everyone's like, awesome, it's on rails, it feels great. And it was such a positive experience ultimately, that, but again, I'm sure this will happen the next time I direct a movie. I'll call you and go, dude, fucking freaking out. This is terrible. This is the end.
The way to approach it always is you're better off to be making the movie more enjoyable for the audience than being right.
Totally.
If your whole thing is you're going there just to be right, then don't have a preview. Just release the movie and let the chips fall where they may. If you're going to be in the process, you got to trust it, right? It's like if you have a soft opening of your restaurant and invite 200 people to taste your food and they all say, I loved everything but the asparagus. And you're like, fuck you.
Yeah.
I'm serving the asparagus.
Yeah.
Then, you might keep getting that note. So that's how I'd rather be good than right all the time.
All the time, man. And look, again, you've seen the movie I directed. I feel like it very much is the type of movie, big or little, that I would always make, which is it's a movie for audiences. Like it's a movie that I want people to enjoy. I'm not trying to make something that's inaccessible or extremely challenging, or like, those are, by the way, movies I love, but I want to make movies for audiences. And so to your point, like that is the beauty of a test screening, is you actually get to put it in front of an audience and see how they react. And as much as I would like to be right, in the end, I just want the movie to be something that people enjoy. And so like that was the really positive part of that experience, is you can watch and go, oh, they really do enjoy it. And this part could be better, or that joke didn't land. And like the reality is, like, as much as I want my favorite joke to be in the movie, I'd rather have a joke that gets a whole audience of people laughing. Like that's why I'm making the movie. So in that sense, like it was a really great experience, and as painful as they can be from time to time, like I wouldn't do it any other way.
So what was your first sale script-wise?
My first sale, it was a movie called Maid of Honor that was ultimately made with Patrick Dempsey years later. But I remember it was Neil Moritz bought it. And I remember it so vividly because, listen, man, this was back when spec scripts were still, and I feel like they're coming back, but it was sort of the best way into the business at the time was write a spec script and hopefully you can get a sale, and that can be sort of the launching pad for your career. And I remember like my managers at the time, they took it out on a Monday, and then you're kind of getting the updates as the week goes on. And then I remember them calling me on a Thursday or Friday and being like, hey, there's an offer on your screenplay. And it's such a surreal experience because you've you've dreamed about it. Like in a lot of ways for a screenwriter, that's your like standing in the driveway, like reenacting the end of a basketball game, you know?
Right.
And then you get the phone call like, hey, this thing happened for you that you've always sort of like played in your head. And it's like an out of body experience. Like I walked out, my sister was living with me at the time in Santa Monica in this like tiny apartment. And I remember going in and she's like, hey, what's up? And I'm like, I remember I was like, I think I just sold a screenplay.
That's
She's like, what do you mean
awesome.
you think? And I'm like, well, they called me and they said XYZ. She's like, no, that means you sold a screenplay. Like that's definitive. Like it's done. And that was it. It was very cool.
So you sell a comedy screenplay, you like writing about dipshits doing fun things and being funny. Who gives you the first big movie to rewrite or to fix or to script doctor? How did that jump happen?
God, dude, that's a really good question. Because I don't know that it was I think it was more of an ABC all the way up to Z where you start doing little rewrites here and there. Hey, this is an open assignment. And then I think over time, people start to realize like, oh, like, this guy has a certain skill set that seems to fit into this thing. And then the real answer, and I'd have to actually think really hard, and I might not be able to give it to you what the first one was, but I think what ended up happening with me is, especially at places like New Line, where we work together, I just started to have a really good shorthand with everybody who worked there and a lot of the producers who produced there. And what you realize in a lot of those sort of script doctory situations is, because I've seen both sides of this, by the way. What I realized is that my job isn't even necessarily to come in and go, everybody get out of the way. I know what the best version of this movie is. I've seen people do that, and that's a real quick way to get yourself not hired again. What I realized is my job is to come in, sit in a room with, for instance, on TAG, you, Tom Sick, the director, the New Line guys, everybody involved with the movie. And again, same thing. Come into the tent, listen to the movie you're all trying to make, and then acclimate to that and help to execute the best version of character work and scenes that are going to continue to move us in the direction of that movie. And that is something that honestly, like, as I've already said, is my favorite part of the process. So weirdly, the idea of being like a, whatever you want to call it, script doctor, guy who comes in to kind of like do those last 10 yards has always been my favorite part of the process. It's the part, like, I feel so privileged that I get to come in, listen to a group of already, like a team that already exists, the fucking 93 Bulls, and be like, and then watch them go, hey, this is how we run the triangle offense here. And I'm like, cool, let me study the playbook. And then I will jump in and I will start sharing the ball and doing all the stuff you guys do. And I just think that's something that, just to paint the other side of it, I have seen writers do the very opposite of that, which is sort of what I described, which is cool, thanks. Let me go off and do what you want. And it's just like, you haven't learned the triangle offense in that version.
And I know that you came into film school wanting to be a director until you were told that's not the first best way to do it, right?
Yeah.
So I know that was always lingering in the back of your mind. However, I also would assume, because I don't think there's a writer out there that hasn't had this happen, that's had multiple things made that they've written, that you've been at a screening or a premiere going, holy shit, that is not what I wrote. That is a completely different movie. Did that also contribute to you wanting to be a director so you can be like, I have to see this all the way. I have to see my words all the way through because I've written this thing and now I'm watching this thing and this thing is not what I wrote and it's not, and your name's on it. And so it's like, hey, here we go. Hope it's a hit. Because I know a lot of writer directors, that is a big part of it. And also, by the way, a lot of writer producers, because they want to be in part of the whole process so that ship does not disconnect from the anchor and drift off into the Atlantic without you. Was that part of it also, is just seeing your words all the way through?
No, Garner. I love every movie that I've ever. No, absolutely. I mean, look, I will say, like, the answer to your question, Did I want to direct because I wanted to see something all the way through and really see what was in my head on the screen? Absolutely. And I joke with my wife about this all the time because she and I co-wrote Let's Have Kids, the movie that I directed. And we have definitely had conversations in the house where she'll say some version, I'm paraphrasing, but some version of like, I don't like the take you used, or I always imagined this as that. And I sort of joke with her, I'm like, this is what it means to be a screenwriter. Because a screenwriter's job is often you write a thing, you hand that thing off, you see that thing, and you think to yourself, that's not how I would have done it. Or I imagined it differently in my head. Or or any version of that. And it doesn't mean you don't like the movie. It just means you saw something different in your head. And so I sort of tease her lovingly that I'm like, this is the job. And you know what the other tough part of the job is? You can never say this publicly. Whenever asked, you have to say you love every frame. So, but yeah, for me, that was a huge part of it and not just from a like, ego place of like, I want it to be my vision. Cause again, like even as a director, like to me, it's an even more collaborative job because you're out there and you're relying on so many other people, your producer, your department heads, your co-writer, your cast to help you execute this thing that you have in your head. For me, it was a little bit like, almost like I really want to figure out and see what kind of movie I would make sort of given that, because you can like, it's almost easy as a writer to kind of like talk that talk of like, I would if I was directing this movie, it would have been this. And so I was sort of like, well, let's see what it would be if you directed that movie. And I will say like, I loved it so much because it really does, like, whether you love it or hate it, like I watched that movie and I'm like, yeah, this is what I wanted. This does represent what's in my head. That does represent what's in my heart. This is the kind of story that I was attracted to telling. And I know that because even as I watch it back, I'm like, this feels like all the movies that, you and I have talked about. This feels like an emotional sort of echo of like the Rob Reiner movies, the Barry Levinson movies, the Nora Ephron movies, like those great movies of the 80s and 90s that I really, like I said, I felt connected to. And it was fun and very satisfying to be able to do that and see it through.
Has it made you a better writer?
Oh my God. Like in ways that I can't even fully explain, because for the first time, and I'll even tie it back to our work together on Tag. I come into that movie and I am working at my absolute best. Like I'm giving you guys everything I have. But what I don't have is for lack of a better word, pressure that I know you guys are feeling to be like, this really is my thing. You, Tomsic, New Line guys, like we're the ones that got to go out here and stand next to this and go, here you go. We stand by this. And there's something about feeling that pressure, again, for lack of a better word, that just elevates you to a new level. So that when I was writing a movie that I was going to direct, it's a different feeling. You're not just going like, like what's a fun thing for the characters to do? Now I'm going like, I got to walk on a set and I got to talk to my lovely actors and I have to be able to back up every single word I have written on this page in a meaningful way because, and not in a like, because I got to convince them to do a way, they are putting themselves out their way. They're showing up every day and they are putting themselves on camera to be watched. As Becky Slover, our producer, used to say, movies are forever. And so like suddenly you're like, God damn, I want to do right by them. I want to do right by every department head who is showing up and bringing me the best possible options. I want to do right by Becky, my producer, who's killing herself to get this movie off the ground. I want to do right by my studio who's putting out money to make this movie. Like there's just a certain level of, I want to stop using the word pressure. What's the word I'm looking for? It's a responsibility. Yeah. There's a level of responsibility that I felt that I just couldn't access purely as a writer, because I feel like in many ways, like you're sort of in service of the movie and in service of the people that hired you and of the filmmaker, but not in the way that you feel as a director.
And I would assume that the first thing you learned is not to write the words exterior night rain.
I learned a lot. I did. I learned a lot of, oh man, especially making a low budget movie. Real quick, you're like, does this character need to be in this movie at all?
And the other thing is that, you hit it on the head, because you've also worked on Mortal Kombat with me. You worked on basically all the movies I've worked on. And so you're right. Like when Tom Sick and I are standing on the set in Atlanta, we have to explain to 9 people and defend the words, because actors have to say it, believe it, know it, and we have to defend it. So it is a different responsibility than a writer writing exterior night rain. They run down a slickened driveway and they all fall on their asses and slide 9 feet, and all the actors are like, "Why?" And I'm like, "Yeah, why are we doing this? It's really complicated and painful and slow." Anyway, so that's good. And why that movie? Why? Because you said that your heroes, with the exception of Nora Ephron, were more, male driven guys being guys. And this is a true grown up romantic comedy in essence, with real life issues about being a parent and relationships and the foibles of that. Why that one? Because look, as a director, you're going to be, for lack of a better word, judged and categorized once you do that. Why that movie?
Man, here's what I'll say. It is a movie it's about, just to spell it out for anyone who, is unaware of it at this point. It's called Let's Have Kids. It's about 2 best girlfriends. They literally were born on the same day and have been best friends every day of their lives. They've sort of done everything together. And at this particular moment in their lives, one goes to the other and says, "Hey, we've done it all together. We got to do the biggest one together. We have to have kids at the same time." And they agree. Of course, one gets pregnant, the other doesn't. And you kind of watch the friendship get tested as they kind of struggle with that change. The truth is, the stories I'm really attracted to, and I think obviously like I identify as a viewer with the male characters in the movies we talked about, but the movies that I really respond to are movies about people who are going through sort of relatable life experiences, and then in a comedic way. And I say that, I remember when I was working on Bad Monkey with Vince Vaughn, he would always say, human experience is the best IP that we have. Mm-hmm. And that always resonated with me, because I was like, God, it's so true. Like I think about the movies I love the most, and whether it's When Harry Met Sally, which is like, can a man and a woman be friends and not have it get romantically cut? You're like, that's incredibly relatable. That's a great human experience. I think about The Big Chill, which is a huge movie for me. That's about a group of friends coming together to, because a friend passes away, and then you watch them in their adult lives kind of pick up where they left off in college. And how does that connection both inform where they are, but also like how they've changed along the way? And like, it's not this like massively high concept magical idea, but for me, it's infinitely watchable because of how relatable it is. So like this idea, Let's Have Kids, I just remember, like when we were having kids, like I just noticed this happening, which was like my wife and her friends kind of like, who's getting pregnant when, and how does that experience, like whether they're going through it together or separately, and how does that inform? And my sisters got pregnant at the same time, and I watched how that relationship sort of like evolved in that way. And then from my male perspective, I noticed that the people, like when I had my first kid, over the course of the first year, 2 years, 3 years, my close male friends that did not have kids, our relationship really did start to go like that. Mm-hmm. And it's not that we were less friends. It's just that we didn't see each other as much anymore. And I wasn't getting invited on the guys' trips anymore. Or if I was, I certainly couldn't go on those guys' trips because honestly, because I was fucking exhausted, because I had a kid and that kind of stuff. And I really thought like, this is an interesting story. The idea of like 2 best friends who, decide we should do this thing together, because not for nothing, if we don't do it at the same time, we have the potential of going like that. And this is where I came to my wife, and I kicked around the idea in my head, and I went to her and I was like, listen, I have this idea for a movie, but I do not have the perspective necessary to execute this. And she was very cool. And she's an incredible writer in her own right. She's, working on a book, and she's written on TV shows and we've written TV shows together. And so she was like, yeah, that sounds, I love that idea. She immediately was like, that's incredibly relatable. And you're absolutely right. You can't do that on your own. And so she was there every step of the way to help me write it. And then as a director, I had her on set and I had Becky on set to always sort of like help me anchor that female perspective. But the truth is, by the time we had the script in place and we were making the movie, then I could really get into the place of like, this is a movie about people dealing with things in their lives. And again, they were there for the sort of like female perspective on it. But it's a long answer to say, for me, this is a movie more about friendship than it and how that changes as you kind of grow up. And it's secondarily a pregnancy movie, which is the part that they were really helping me out with.
And the Vince Vaughn quote bears repeating, because if you're a young writer and you're daunted by the fact that the world just seems to be focused on IP right now, his entire thought about that is really related to like John Hughes too, which is birthdays and funerals and driving cross country and graduations, and those are all IP because everybody experiences. So the way John Hughes created Breakfast Club and 16 Candles and these movies is that that became IP because it's such a universal experience. And so if you're a young screenwriter or writer director and you write about that can become IP. And so you can create your own IP by writing about stuff that the world at large as human beings experiences. So Vince is very smart about that.
I would agree. I 100% agree with you, and would say even one step further for me personally, like, again, John Hughes, like huge storytelling influence for me, and Vince for that matter. We've talked a lot about John Hughes. Like, I always think it's easier to start with to write those ideas, because the truth is, like, everything in this movie, Let's Have Kids, like, yes, it's about these two women one getting pregnant and them going through it, but it's also about their relationships with their husbands. And Zoe Chow, who gets pregnant in the movie, her relationship with her mother, played by Mary Steenburgen, and how that is, sort of has its own baggage that comes along with it. That's informing how her pregnancy goes. And all of these things that, to me, are incredibly relatable. And it's why when Ellie and I sat down to write every day, there was never the question of like, what's the next scene? It was always like, what sort of experience that we've been through do we want to share next? And I always think, especially for people who are writing for the first time, I'd much rather be sitting down trying to like sift through a lifetime of experiences to figure out which one do I want to write about, as opposed to being like, here's my crazy high concept idea that's a great idea, but like I'm kind of sort of blank page every day because I haven't experienced that. Like, I'll give you an example. A great movie that I loved, Bruce Almighty. What happens if you are suddenly given the power of God? Like, that is a way higher degree of difficulty movie to write than I think people would assume, because the truth is, no one has the life experience of what it means to be God. That's like, you're sort of sitting down and going like, okay, on a set piece level, very easy, but on a human emotional level, I got to do a lot of work to figure out what this guy's going through, and they did a great job with it. Whereas I think if I'm sitting down going like 16th birthday, funeral, having children, getting married, like those are things that you're like, we've all been through them. We all have experiences. And as storytellers, I now get to convert that into something interesting every day that I sit down to write.
Well, I want to answer my own question that I asked you earlier about how did you make the jump from comedy to these big, giant blockbusters that you are being a script doctor on. And that's sort of the answer to the question, is that your North Star is always the human experience and the emotion between the characters. So even if you have like, a gorilla slamming into a skyscraper or a guy flying, in a black suit, you're always focused on, or Mortal Kombat, which is a bunch of guys kicking the shit out of each other from a video game. You're always focused on, what does this mean to the characters? The action is the action, but what does the action inform about the emotion of the characters and where are they in the story and where are they in their own lives. And I think that's what makes you so good and why you're in so demand in that way, is that's always your North Star.
I appreciate you saying that, and I feel very seen, because even as you're saying it, I can go back and I remember, on Rampage, like, yes, that's a poster of DJ and a giant gorilla, but when I come onto that movie, I'm like, this is a friendship story. This is a, like, that's what this is to me. This is about my best friend's in danger, and how do I get him back? And he's, he's going through some changes, and I got it. Like, that's how I approach that stuff. Black Adam to me was always like, this is a family story. This is a found family story. This is about a guy who shows up and he doesn't have a place in the world, and I mean, this is going to sound insane as I'm talking about it now, but I'm like, he went through a lot of trauma, and he never had anybody there for him. And now he finds people that are like, hey man, we got your back. And how effective that can be in terms of like softening someone just enough to become like not a villain, but like sort of an anti-hero, or even like, I remember Mortal Kombat being like, what an incredible father-daughter story this is. You know what I mean? Like, this is about a guy trying to prove himself. Like, when we meet, in the beginning of the movie, you're like, he's getting his ass beat, like, who is he? What makes him special? And then being able to sort of like go on that journey and discover like, oh shit. Like, because I think that, again, that to me is incredibly relatable. This idea that we all go through our lives being like, is this all there is? And then something comes along and you go, this is my moment. This is when I step up. And it's like, yes, in the end, that movie is awesome because it's fucking sick martial arts, and we're going into the fucking other worlds and we're fighting dudes with sick powers like Sub-Zero. But I'm always coming at it being like, what's the human story? Like the Scorpion story in that movie, I remember watching cuts of that and being like, this is such a human story. It's like such a rich, like emotionally resonant story to me. Like that opening sequence with it, like, you're like, this is awesome. Forget all the crazy shit that's happening. This is just a great movie that I want to watch independent of that. And in the end, I know everyone else is there for the awesome shit, but like, that's what keeps me and that's what keeps me even talking about it. Here we are, whatever, years later, and I'm fired up for a sequel because of that experience I had, both as a creative partner, but also just as an audience member with that movie.
And I know that you're still doing these huge script doctoring jobs. And I also know, because it's annoying the shit out of me, that you only want to write stuff that you direct. So where do you go from here? Where does it, by the way, I encourage everybody to see the movie when it comes out, or if you have a way to call Adam's representation and see the movie, it's amazing. But like, what's next? Where do you go from here? Because you've written huge $200 million budgets, and you've also made a movie that costs a couple $1 million. Where do you see your career headed? Because the guys you mentioned, sadly, those movies are hard pressed to get made right now, which is probably why you're also working in television, because all those guys also did work in television, and all that, Vince is working in television, but Steve Carell's working in television, Will Ferrell's working in television, Owen Wilson's working in television. The great comedians are all working in television now, and certainly the comedic actresses as well. Where do you go now as a motion picture writer director? What is your next move, and how are you plotting your path?
Man, the first thing I would say is, yes, I've been lucky enough to work in TV and on some really great shows with my buddy Bill Lawrence, who's the king of television. What I have learned about myself is I really like television, but I love movies. Like, I truly, in my bones, love them in a way that I'm like, I just want to make more movies. And I say that because, and I feel like you're a kindred spirit in that way. And it would be difficult for me to tell you exactly what it is that makes them sort of that next level special for me. I think part of it is just like, I'm attracted to stories that are a contained, here it is. And then we walk out and we have that experience and we put it away and we hold it in our heads and hearts and we move on with our lives, but we carry it with us. I think like that's just been formative for me. And that's why I can list so many movies that have had an impact on me. As far as, where I go, Yeah, man. I mean, you really kind of summed up the existential dilemma of where we are as a business right now, which is so my wife's favorite movie is Father of the Bride. And it certainly, like you can see echoes of it in the movie that we made without question.
My first movie. That's the first movie I ever worked on.
Is it really?
Yeah.
That's crazy. Okay.
I mean, not the original. The original was Elizabeth Taylor and Spencer Tracy.
Right. That would
not
be,
that
yeah,
one.
you look great, Garner, for somebody who's 130 years old.
Yeah, Charles Shire and Nancy Myers.
Yeah, exactly. Shire Myers, we talk about it a lot in our house because that was like a husband and wife joint. But that is a movie that I'm like, that is the definition of human experience as IP. That is a movie that, in my mind, should be a massive hit whenever it were to get made. And yet, like, I do think that is the type of movie that doesn't have as much space in the landscape today. And it bums me out, but I am an incredibly competitive person who loves a challenge. And so having made this movie that is very much a human experience movie and looking at the movies I loved growing up and that have sort of like defined my sort of taste as both an audience member and as a filmmaker, I'm kind of like, I'd want to take a shot at making those movies. I'm also convinced that stuff is, for lack of a better word, cyclical. And that if you and I can point to great comedies that set the world on fire when people said like, it feels like comedies are dead, and then The Hangover comes out. And everyone goes, holy shit, we're back. And obviously like not nearly the situation we're in now because there were great comedies that had come out before that. But I am a firm believer that if you can make a great, relatable, audience-forward comedy with a big heart at the end, I think it's a big, really important component to it. I believe that there will be an audience for that again. I really do.
I couldn't agree more. And I thank you, brother, for your time. You've been very generous, and I encourage everybody to see Let's Have Kids when they can. And so I always end all of these interviews with the same question: best memory on set.
Oh God, best memory on set. There's so many. I'm going to give you this one though, and it's both best and most stressful. It was shooting this movie, Let's Have Kids. It was a 19-day shoot, very, very, very quick. But had an amazing crew, had an amazing cast. Every day was a pleasure. My kids were in the movie. They had a couple scenes going full Judd Apatow. And that day that I had my wife as my co-writer and my children as cast members was so special, but the most stress I felt during the thing because I very quickly realized like, oh wait, now I have to be director and dad simultaneously. And I also had it's their first time on set. Like they're very naturally gifted performers, but like they'd never been on a movie set before. So they were just like, the definition of kids in a candy store. They thought it was the coolest. And so I had to constantly be like, I was going from like, okay, everybody, if we're just like, here's what we're going to do here to like, just very quickly, guys, I need you guys to quiet down, have a seat, no more candy, no more craft services. So it was like wearing those two hats was very stressful, but that was also definitely my favorite day on set.
Hey, brother, very on brand. Your best memory was human experience.
Absolutely, man.
Thank you so much, Adam.
Appreciate you, Garner.
Thanks for tuning in for this episode of The Producer's Guide. If you're a fan of this podcast, make sure to rate, review, subscribe, and share with your friends and family. And if you got any questions about producing, send me a DM on X at Todd_Garner. I want to thank my producer, Steve Delamater. And until next week, I'm Todd Garner. See you then.